Hello and welcome to a special Focus on Africa debate. I'm Alex Jakana. Now, we're in the radio theatre here at BBC New Broadcasting House talking about the nature and the future of democracy on the African continent. Can Africa reinvent democracy? Should it reinvent democracy? Well, it certainly has the potential. Africa has been described as the world's youngest continent, with an average age of just 19. It is also young in terms of democracies. Many countries gained their independence in the 1960s, and it was only in the 1990s that many one-party states reverted to multi-party democracy. More recently, there's been a wave of new democratic movements. The Arab Spring, for example, which began in Tunisia. And Tunisia, you remember, has just completed its first successful and peaceful presidential elections. In this debate, we'll explore the impact of Africa's young population on its fledgling and more established democracies. We'll look at the challenges as well as the changes facing democracy in Africa, like the impact of the social media on the political process and democracy. We'll also assess the future of democracy for the African continent. And to help us do this, we've got a panel. On our panel, we've got Nana Akufo-Addo, who's a former foreign minister, also a presidential candidate in the forthcoming Ghanaian elections next year. Jason Njoku, who is the founder of Iroko, and that's an online film distribution site. It works rather like Netflix. And we've got Ayat Neina, who is the co-founder and director of the Libyan Youth Movement. That's an online network of young Libyan activists. And finally, Robtel Nejai Pelele, who is a Liberian academic and activist as well as author. Ladies and gentlemen, your panelists. I'd also like to say a very big welcome to our audience here. Thank you very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure, and it still is going to be a great pleasure having you on. To get things started, I'd like to ask a question about the state of democracy, but for you who are watching us online, just to let you know, you can join this conversation, don't feel left out, by going to Twitter. The hashtag is BBC Democracy Day, and you can just tweet, or if you're on Facebook, send your messages to BBC Africa. We'll get them in and I'll put them to our panelists. I'll start with you, Nana. The state of democracy in Africa, that's a question that many people would debate about. From where you are, what does it look like?
Oh, it looks much better than it was before. I don't think there can be any. You yourself, in the introduction that you made it clear. 30 years ago, there was hardly a democratic state in the entire continent. We were under either military rule or one-party rule, one form or the other. But ever since the process began of opening up the political space in Africa, we're seeing increasingly stronger and stronger institutions in many countries in Africa. The continent continues to have lots of problems. I mean, the biggest problem, of course, being that we sit on the world's greatest resources and we have the poorest population in the world. That continues to be the case. But as it is, how it is that we're going to address this problem, we are going to address it if we strengthen the processes of democratic accountability.
Okay, and I'll come to how we can make it better in a minute. But what you're saying is that from where you are, it's not the way it used to be, it's better. And is it fair to say you're saying it's not as good as it can be?
Of course it can be better. So democracy in Africa is a work in progress. I mean, we're here commemorating Magna Carta 800 years ago and the calling of the first parliament in 750 years ago. I believe that's what Democracy Day is all about. Yeah, and it tells you that we're at different ends of the historical spectrum when you look at democracy here and democracy in Africa.
In a minute, I'll be coming to ask what has kept it from being as good as it could possibly be, and whether politicians such as yourself are part of the problem.
Part of it is also the fact that it's young, and there are many challenges that we're going to have to overcome.
Let me bring in Jason. Jason, you're young, you're very successful, an entrepreneur and a business person. As a business person, a young business person in contemporary Africa, because you've got your business offices right across the continent, I think West Africa, Central Africa, and Southern Africa, you've got offices. Would you say the state of business, the state of democracy is good for business people such as yourself?
Absolutely. You need security, you need rule of law, and you need a consistent focus on strong institutions to be able to enable business people just to get on with creating jobs, creating wealth, and and sort of general activities. I think, especially in Nigeria, democracy is vibrant. People are almost overexcited. Coming from the UK, where there was a certain level of political apathy, in Nigeria, it's the complete opposite. We talk about the engagement of social media. Both those in the West and those in Nigeria are super engaged, super vocal. But I think there's a fragile balance at the moment, especially in Nigeria with the coming elections, where there is something of a disconnect and a fragile balance between what the very young and vibrant population want and what the elder sort of statesmen and institutions are actually able to deliver in terms of like accountability, free press, and just the ability to actually understand what the young Nigerian is going through at the moment. So I think we're at that fragile stage where it can essentially go either way.
Do you find that your officers in the different regions of the continent have fared differently depending on the democratic context they're in? So you've got one in Kigali, which has got a fair bit of criticism for its approach on freedoms. You've got one in Nigeria. You've got one in South Africa.
Johannesburg. Yeah.
Johannesburg. Do you find that democratic space has a direct impact on how well your business does in a particular country?
I think strong institutions enable strong democracies. I would think that the bureaucracy, which obviously is created from the institutions, make it easier or more difficult to do business. So in Kigali, incredibly easy to do business. In Johannesburg, slightly different, but still akin to what you consider to be Western standards. Whereas in Nigeria, the lack of strength within the institutions there, and this is like right across the spectrum, make it somewhat challenging to really get things done without any kind of like friction, both real friction and man-made friction.
Okay, and just for those of us who are joining from across the world and you're wondering where Kigali is, it's in Rwanda. I'm sure most of you already knew that, but just in case. Ayat, you're from Libya, and there was a lot of... The uprising led to the toppling of Muammar Gaddafi's regime, and there was a real push for democracy by young people such as yourself, and you got it. Does it look like what you expected?
I mean, it certainly is not a finished product. How we look at it as a process, and Libya is going to continue to tackle these challenges until things are stable, as Jason said. In order to be democratic, in order to enjoy those conditions, we have to have stability, security, a government and a system that has accountability and transparency and rule of law. And those are things that we can see now do not come overnight. And there's a lot of conditions that are kind of overspill from the conflict in 2011, where we have widespread arms, various groups that have no allegiance to any one party. They have no allegiance to a state whatsoever. So these are various things that we have to contend with, and unfortunately, young people, in many respects, have been pushed back into the background, and the governments, mainly a majority of an older male demographic, have not really opened the doors to young people who really were the ones that took to the streets and were the forefront of the uprising in 2011.
But it is the young people with the guns, isn't it, in these different militias?
Effectively, these are the disenfranchised youth who have kind of felt that they have no other way to seek power but to take up arms. But it isn't without the warm welcome of the transitional government and the government at the time, who basically co-opted these armed groups to protect their
Is the growing
facilities.
sense that the pre-democratic days were better than this Western democracy in Libya justified?
Pre-2011?
Yeah, pre-2011.
No, I think that...
Because you're thinking that right now, many places that really, there's a lot of instability.
Definitely.
People struggle to think, how am I going to raise my children? Resources and simple public services, all these things are all gone. Pre-2011, they were all available.
I mean, I think that most Libyans are still looking at the Libya that they dreamt of in 2011 when they took to the streets, and young people, at least, are aware that it is a process. Are they growing tired of the conditions today? Yes, most definitely. People want to lead secure lives, want to be able to provide for their families and for their children to go to school. And I don't think that that in any respect justifies the 42 years before the uprising.
Rob Tell, as a Liberian, some people would say that Liberia, in one particular aspect, has perhaps begun to change the way democracy works in Africa, and that is by having the first woman president on the continent. Does democracy look particularly strong for that or any other reason in Liberia?
Well, I think President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, as someone who's worked in the trenches with her for 4 years, has definitely opened up the democratic space. There's more political participation. There's the ability for people to speak truth to power on the radio. There's the ability to disagree, and particularly disagree with the president. So I think it's fundamentally changed in the past 10 years. But I think what's troubling for a lot of us, not only in Liberia but across the continent, is that there's often an assumption that political participation and political equality as it relates to democracy ultimately equates to economic equality or economic participation. And I think that's where the disconnect is. I just read a really fascinating article by William Bello, who is a columnist for Foreign Policy in Focus, and he said that liberal democracies, in many ways, might institutionalize or entrench political participation, the rule of law, by a large majority of people, but in many ways, entrenches also economic inequality. And that disconnect is incredibly problematic. So if you have the democratic dividends of political participation without economic equality, then you really haven't succeeded at all.
So people being able to vote, but between elections struggling to have bread on the table and a roof over their head.
Elections are not the panacea for democracy.
Let's throw this to the audience very quickly. A significant number of you are of African origin. Some of you are first-generation immigrants to the United Kingdom, some of you second, third, and many of you probably have just viewed Africa from the outside looking in. What does it look like? What's the state of democracy? The gentleman with his hand right up here, yellow wristband, Hewete, if we could get to him. In the meantime, I'll take a couple of other questions, so just have your question ready. What does the state of democracy look like from where you are?
I'm Henry Bonsu, Ghanaian, born in the north of England, in Manchester, returning home one day, hopefully. In many ways, as Nana Akufo-Addo said, it's far better than it used to be, but there's one big problem. The institution of the presidency in many countries is far too powerful, and it gives people who are part of the president's team the desire and the motivation to grab while they can while the president's in office. It gives presidents the motivation to stay in power for longer than the people have decided. And it means that if you're in opposition, there's almost nothing you can do to influence the way in which your country goes forward. The presidency.
Let me just get, Nana, your response to that. The presidencies are too powerful, and that's getting in the way of really, blossoming democracies.
I mean, in a limited sense, there's something in what Henry Bonsu is saying. But at the end of the day, what is it? What are we talking about? We're talking about government which is driven by the force of public opinion. And if we recognize that that really is at the essence of democratic rule, then you have the stage where we have to think of how we can mobilize our populations to make sure that the institutions of our democracy really work.
So that's the theory. The practice he's saying
I'm not
is
talking
that
about the theory. I'm talking about the
theoretically,
practice.
yes, a people-driven process.
Yeah.
That would be
that
great.
That is at the end of popular.
But at the end of the day, he's saying that what he's witnessing is that you've got such strong presidencies that no matter what's happening at the grassroots, they can just trample over it.
Well, we're seeing increasingly that it cannot just be trampled over. You take, for instance, what has happened in Burkina Faso. A ruler who, for many people, was a very successful ruler for a very long time, who attempted to change the constitution so that he could continue to stay.
So you're happy with the amount of power presidents have?
No, I'm not happy with it. I'm not saying, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the process for redressing the balance is what should concern us.
Okay,
How can we get more and more and more people involved in the process who will be able to say, no, this particular balance should not be this way, but it should be that way.
On the question of the power at the center, the presidents, I mean, is there a man more powerful than President Barack Obama? He does have a lot of power, so if it's good enough for the States, why shouldn't it be good enough for Ghana, Uganda, South Africa? Oh, the mic has been taken away from you. Sorry. Well, we'll have to move on swiftly then. You had your chance, you lost it. The gentleman in the blue... sorry. The gentleman third from the left in a blue... You had your hand up. Okay, I'll take the lady with the glasses here. Hawete, in front here. A quick question, and Mayeni, if you could get someone lined up on your end, I'll come in a minute as well. Okay, question? You had your hand up, madam? No? Okay, we'll give it to the gentleman. Yes, you did. Yeah, I thought you did. There you are.
Sorry, Pamela Mayorkas. I had the privilege of living in Ghana for 3.5 very short months back in the 1970s. This may be taking the debate to a slightly different direction, but one of the things that often occurs to me is to what extent are the problems of the African countries worsened by the behaviour not just of the Western powers, but of Western businesses, a lot of consultancy firms, a lot of the companies that get very juicy contracts out of Africa and therefore make sure that they're influencing the people at the top who they think have influence. To what extent is that damaging to grassroots African democracy?
Roberta, I saw you nodding. You look like you've got something to say there.
Vociferously, I agree with you. I think one of the things that's troubled me, particularly in Liberia, is that, you know, when we talk about illicit financial flows, that's the crux of why corruption is allowed to thrive in many African countries, where you have members of the legislature signing concession company deals, foreign direct investment deals that don't benefit the people on the ground because they're given brown envelopes. And it takes two to tango in the corruption tango. It's not just our elected officials, but it's also these multinationals that have profit as a major motivator. So I think the Western institutions, the financial institutions, the governments, the multinational corporations also are complicit in all of this, and it must stop. And it's going to take citizen engagement, citizen power, exposing the powers that be. And when elections come up, even though I don't believe that they are the panacea to changing and transforming the system, that you vote them out. I'll give you an example. In Liberia, we had elections for senators a couple of weeks ago, and only 2 of the senators we elected 9 years ago have been reelected. So that essentially says that the people are fed up, that the dividends of democracy are not trickling down, and they want economic equality. That's the bottom line for
Let me jump in here. Ayat, if it weren't for the intervention of the foreign powers and from the West as well, Gaddafi would still be in power. So we can't say, oh, stay out, and then when we need help, we say, oh, come in.
Right.
Which of the two is it?
I think with everything, it's a fine balance with how you interact. I mean, Africa is not going to exist as a closed void with no interaction with the outside world. And same with Libya. Libya has resources that it exports to the world. So there has to be accountability and transparency with those processes inside Libya and the governments that existed and with the outside world and how they deal with Libya. So I think it goes 2 ways. If we expect Libya to develop into a transparent, accountable government, that has to function the same way with everyone that comes in to deal with Libya. So we can't have any double standards, I guess.
Yeah, so we can't really criticize.
I mean, the NATO invasion of Libya is problematic. So I think we have to talk about that as a reality as well.
But without that support, there wouldn't be a democracy in Libya, would there?
Well, that's a question. That's debatable, to be quite honest.
Let me get some
but Alex,
yes, Nana.
Can I just add
one
to
thing
that?
which is that
Yeah,
clearly,
I actually want to answer that as well.
The
Let
solution
Nana first
cannot be that we go back to one-man rule or dictatorships or tyrannies. That is not the way whereby we're going to be able to mobilize the people of our continent to ensure that things that are done in their name are really done in their name. Because at the end of it, that is what I understand you to be saying.
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is there's a way to remove a one-man dictatorship.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, the question that the lady posed about Western influence in our country, yes, it's genuine. There's no 2 ways about it. It's across the globe. It's not just in Africa. So that phenomenon is not a peculiarly Africa. What we are after is a situation where those who govern in our name on the continent do so in our interest. And we have populations that need to be defended and promoted, and that we have systems of government that allow that to be done. It is not going to mean perfect rule. I ask myself the question, you've said it twice, economic equality. What exactly does it mean? I mean, does it mean that we're going to divide up the pot so that everybody gets the same share? I'm not quite sure I understand.
Jason,
I understand the situation of aspirations, whereby we create a system that people, the enterprise, people with opportunity, have the opportunity to develop and grow.
Yes, Jason, you want to jump in there?
So
I can see you're itching to.
Absolutely. I think the rhetoric is fine. I think it works incredibly well. But in reality, especially in Nigeria, your political influence is directly proportional to your economic gains. I think it's probably one of the most extreme examples in Africa of where if you're in political office, you just make money. Somehow, you just make a lot of money. No, and the thing is, we talk about the accountability. It's like there is not a week which goes past which there is not some massive political scandal where someone is literally caught with their hand in the till. Do you know what happens?
And nothing happens.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing actually happens.
So it's interesting. For the benefit of those of you who are just joining us and watching, Nigeria is actually having their elections very shortly, getting ready for that. And this would be actually quite topical about this time as we talk about the power and economic world. You asked the question, what does that economic equality look like? And some would think you're almost sort of brushing it aside.
No, I'm not brushing it
because
aside.
I think inequality really is becoming a real problem, not just in Africa, but globally.
Yeah,
Yes,
there's a report by Oxfam just the other day about the fact that 1% of the population owns more than 50% of the wealth in the entire nation, ahead of the Davos summit coming up in the World Economic Forum. So it is a problem.
At the end of the day, when you're talking about democracy, you're talking about a certain way of ruling, certain institutions that help people govern themselves, that they do so that people can speak out, they can openly, citizens can participate in the political process, they form political parties, they elect people to go in their name. You have a structure. That structure is not meant to resolve all the problems of human existence. It cannot, and it has never done so, and it will never do so.
Okay.
But what it can do is to provide a base from which important issues can be addressed by the societies that are concerned. And for me, it is extremely important that we continue to stress that the open system of government, you're talking about corruption in Nigeria. My own country, we had 30 years ago, government came into power, shot some people because they said that they had been corrupt. It has not stopped corruption in Ghana. So clearly that is not the solution, lining up a few people and shooting them.
Let's come to that in a minute. Let me just take some, if you're good. Yes.
Thank you very much.
May I ask you just to stand up so that our cameras can get your truly handsome frame there?
Thank you. My name is Anthony Selman, and I represent the Liberian Embassy in the UK. My question is about the issue of democracy. People equate democracy with multi-party systems. And we've seen that in Africa, for a country to be democratic, we've seen the existence of several political parties. For instance, in my own country, Liberia, there are 22 political parties. And this is something that gave rise to disunity after the elections. We've seen Western democracies, for instance, the United States, they got 3 political parties. Even the UK, there's less than 5 political parties. But Africa has been made to understand that for you to have a democratic system, you must have a lot of political parties. There are no limitation. Is there a way that...
you're not suggesting that there should be a limit on the number of political parties, or are you? That's how Africa could reinvent democracy.
That's what I'm putting to the panel.
By law?
Yes.
By law?
Not by law, but by design or by consultation. Would it be a good thing to limit the number of political parties in Africa as in the West so that a political system can work effectively? Would that be a solution to enhancing democracy in Africa?
Mr. Salman, I don't think that the parties that you have here were the product of law. They were the product of social development and pressure. And that is exactly what is going to happen on our own continent. That today, I keep coming back to it, democracy in our continent is a work in progress. 60 years after independence, most of which were under non-democratic atmosphere. Today, we're now coming to grips. Little by little, some of these matters will be resolved. Small parties continue to exist and have no influence. After some time, the people in them will make their own decisions as to whether it is necessary to continue down that path. But it will take some time. We cannot get to the situation of America or Britain overnight. They themselves, it took them a long time to get to where we are. Let me come back to it. Today we're sitting here commemorating an event that took place 800 years ago.
I don't think we should be aspiring to limit the number of political parties. In fact, Anthony, I mean, there's a joke in Liberia that says the fact that we had 22 people running for the highest president of the land presidency in 2005 is a lesson learned for the United States, because there are only two major parties in the United States, and the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are the ones that are entrenched. Yeah, the Green Party has a little bit of influence, but they can learn a thing or two from the fact that we have such a wide space where more people can participate in political parties and run without fear or favor.
So in a way, Africa is reinventing democracy.
Absolutely.
Okay,
And this was
very
not
briefly, and then I'm going to take some comments from our viewers who are watching us online. Ayat, yes, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, just to address the point about limiting political parties, I think you just have to let the natural process take its course, and people can, choose who they wish to represent them. We're coming from a space where there were no choices whatsoever, and so that natural flourishing of various opinions and kind of ideas that people want to propagate should take its course. And I think that using the West as kind of our measuring tape should be not necessarily what we measure ourselves up against.
Okay,
I think that
all right. If you've just joined us, you're listening or watching the BBC, and we're having a debate, a special focus on Africa debate about democracy in Africa. Is Africa reinventing a democracy? And you're joining us online via the hashtag BBC Democracy Day. Listen to what you've been saying. Lil Muded asks, who are we kidding? Redefining democracy, huh? The truth is, democracy is dying. Democracy is dying. Very strong words. Says democracy is dying in Africa, and we know it. And then we've got this one coming from Amir Sidi, who says, Africa's democracy is still under construction, but we have shown remarkable dedication to redefine it, and a good omen for us. We've got Kanta and Merga saying, there is need now to find a new direction on African political debate in terms of socioeconomics, ideals, and actions. I'll read just one more here, coming in from Pinops, who says, politicians are surprised by how hard it is to make the changes they promise. How naive do you have to be? Interesting. Listen, if you would like to have your comment added to those, please go ahead. And it's BBC Democracy Day, the hashtag that you can join. Now, one of the things, talking about picking up on the politicians that has been mentioned in that last tweet there, when we look at the political space on the continent, something interesting is observed. And this is a personal observation. I could be wrong. You guys could join me in this. When I look over the past 50 years, the age of the presidents or the heads of government, heads of states on the African continent have steadily gone up. Think of the presidents we had just after independence, yeah? These were fairly young men, and the presidents we have now, we've got presidents in their 90s, and I think the youngest will probably be in their 60s, yeah? And then you go to the rest of the developing world, older democracies. Over the past 50 years, it would appear, and this is a generalization, that the age of the leaders has slowly been coming down. Good or bad? Jason.
So I think in Nigeria, there is an influence which we haven't really discussed on the panel, and that is the influence of tribe and religion. I think Nigeria in particular, there is no framework of democracy or any sort of rule of law, or any kind of real debate which does not basically come down to what tribe are you from, which religion are you. That essentially sort of has completely almost divided the country.
Are you saying that's responsible for the age? Because I'm quite disturbed. And what you're saying is true. We'll come to that, hopefully, time allowing. But looking at the age, you're a young man yourself. Are you happy to have people who are old enough to be your grandfather, your president?
Well, the key thing, again, are the institutions strong enough to enable a younger person to even pass through the process to the point where they become, one, a rising star, even a leader? And I think therein comes the notion where the institutions are built to kind of like somehow mitigate the religious, the tribal aspects, for example. And there's this thing which they've recently had, I think they've somewhat kind of abolished it, but it's called zoning. So like every few years, the president of Nigeria will come from, be a Muslim, be a Christian. Like, how do you introduce like young leadership in that type of
Ayat, yes, I can see this has got everyone excited. Ayat and then Robtel and yeah.
And given the premise that democracy
I'm sure you do.
Sorry, given the premise that democracy is fairly new in Africa, there's kind of no rhyme or reason to say that these older leaders have any more capacity than young people. So for me, at least in Libya, I encourage young people to take to the political sphere and pursue it, because the older generation that currently holds power has no more experience than young people, because we're all starting from zero, or if not negative. But they currently don't hold any more capacity or experience than young people today.
All right, so that's been agreed. Would you say that part of the problem is the fact that the men at the top are really old, or the men and the women?
Yes, they're fairly disconnected from the populations that they presume to represent and govern.
Let's take a look at the Arab Spring. This is what you were pushing for. Young movements such as yourself started in Tunisia. Interestingly, the man that's been elected in Tunisia, peaceful elections, is what, 88? Was that the Arab Spring you were hoping for?
Definitely not. But it's a process.
Robtel.
I mean, I think that for me, the important point is not so much the age, although I think age is a problem, and it can be very concerning. But I've met very young people who are incredibly non-progressive in their thinking, just as much as I've met older people who are non-progressive in their thinking. And so what I aspire for is a person of integrity, a person who is committed to transformation in my country, Liberia, regardless of their age. And I would like to see a younger person who looks like me and maybe has some of the same kinds of thoughts I have. But if that person comes in a different guise, then so be it. So we need to be very careful about the age factor in determining whether or not that person can represent you well.
Okay.
So.
Now, Nana, you'd be one of those politicians people would say, listen, let's make way for younger people.
From Rob is going. And in any event, also to comment on the comparison you yourself made, Europe's population is growing older and older, and its political leaders, according to you, are growing younger. I don't know whether there's a connection there, as Africa also has a young population and its leadership is getting older. I don't know. It seems to me there seems to be...
That's very interesting. Let me get some comments. All right.
Because I think
let me get some comments in. I've got, yes, madam, your name and your question or comment.
Hi, my name is Chi Yustanga. I'm a community organizer here in the United Kingdom. My question is, to the panel in a general comment on democracy in Africa as a whole, because each of the four of you are discussing democracy in your experiences, and we all have different experience of that. But the older generations are still in charge because culturally, Africa rely on the elders to have a say in what goes on in their family. And that has not moved on. So even if you do have a different idea or conversation with yourself and how you want to vote in a political party, most of your family will actually probably encourage you to do otherwise. Therefore, chances of having your own democratic view, voting in the way you expect to do, is not going to happen quite readily. However, education and economic inequality plays such a huge role that it should not be discounted. I'm surprised, sir, that you're actually mentioning that in economic inequality is not a factor. It is. If people have economic equality, they will be in a far better position to actually sit down and reflect on issues affecting them and then make an informed decision as to what to do with their lives. But at the moment, everybody's busy working and not even engaged in the democratic process. Engagement is the key, and education is such a huge factor that everybody should have a free education.
Chi, thank you very much. Let me, before I get a second comment on, I'll pick out the particular segment. Stay with the microphone because I'll probably get you to talk to Nana in a minute. I'll pick out the segment you talked about, the older generation and how they're revered in Africa, which, where I come from in Uganda, it's true. When an older person gets up to speak, the rest of you really, you give them time, they take as long as they can. Nana. Some people would say that let's face it, you've tried to be president before, you have been unsuccessful.
Yeah.
You have achieved a lot of things, and there are a lot of younger people, way younger than you, that would, yes, make mistakes, but definitely have the potential to lead. Why are you running again next year?
The matter's not in my hands. I mean, I didn't
That's an interesting, very convenient escape route. Surely, at the end of the day, it's you who makes the decision whether you run or not.
I made the decision to present myself to my party, asking them that if they agree, I want to go again.
Should you
they chose me.
Should you have, though, why didn't you find someone younger to put forward? Just like some of the people in the Democratic Party thought, okay, listen, there is this young man, Barack Obama, let's see if we can bring him to the front of the queue. And not everyone was happy about it. But shouldn't you be doing that? Shouldn't you be scouting for younger talent in your party instead of putting your name forward?
70-year-old Reagan walked into the White House. Nobody had a problem with it.
That was then. Now we're looking at the continent of Africa, and we're seeing that, listen, age is clearly an issue, well, to some people.
To some people. I think at the end of the day, and I have to what is it? You're saying, first of all, you have the energy. Beyond the energy, you have also the commitment. You want to try and see whether you can do something to change the facts of your society. Of course, doing so within the context of democratic government. Those are the two main things you have. You think you have the physical, psychological energy for leadership. You also have a commitment to a certain vision of what your country should be. And it is those that are driving your...
It's difficult to actually understand what you're saying, because if you're saying that a 70-year-old man has got more vigor than a 40-year-old man, for example... He has.
I'm understanding me. I never said that.
Yes,
I say, you ask why am I? I'm saying I believe I have the energy. I don't say therefore I have more energy. I say I have the energy.
You have the energy.
And I also have the commitment. And those are the two things that are driving.
I think the point is that the younger people, the younger generation, are not being given the chance to actually participate effectively in the economic and political sphere in Africa because of what we've just said. Religion, which the young lady said, the man said from Nigeria, because everybody's voting on ethnic grounds and you have to respect your elder. You're less likely to actually follow your own true belief in how the country should be changed. Therefore, the decision and the questions that are not the right questions that are being asked. We are therefore trying to make sure that young people are engaged.
No, before I can see this has got everyone quite excited. Now, there was we invited some younger people here, some students, specifically because you were younger people. If you're in the audience, I'd really love to hear your thoughts on this. So just let me see some hands. Everyone's hand is going up. Well, I agree we're all young, but you know what I mean. I'll start with you, sir.
My name is Idris. I live in Windsor, native Ghanaian. Can I just say that no one has stolen the right of any young man to stand in any political position that they so desire to do. So I therefore disagree with my dear lady there. But my question is, drawing from what happened in Paris a few days ago, we all know what happened. And being a young Muslim myself, and from northern Ghana, I'd like to know how we as emerging leaders of Africa portray and safeguard the youth from exploitation of extremism and anti-Semitism in line with our growing democracies. Okay. Because Africa is not just on its own, we're all connected to the rest of the world.
That's a good question, how we can safeguard youth from being exploited. Hey, wait, I'm going to ask you to go to the back. I've got a lot of people who haven't had a chance to speak.
Can I say something?
Yes, in the meantime, Iroko say something. As a young businessman, what are your thoughts on this? And let's get the mic distributed to the people at the back over there.
So the first time I landed in Kigali in Rwanda, I was amazed at just how clean, efficient, just surprised that there was a place in Africa which just could run like that. So I spent time trying to understand, how did how did Rwanda go from my hotel Rwanda sort of expectations of it to where it is today? And what I realized when I spoke to people was that Kagame's been in power for almost 20 years now. When he came into power, and over a period of time, he realized that he needed like fresh young people to sort of staff up his institutions, not necessarily in like elected positions, but just in terms of the bureaucracy to sort of help him rule Rwanda. What he actually did was his generals and his like people who were loyal to him, he removed them from positions they were expected just to sit in, and staffed them with like young individuals with a very long-term perspective that if Rwanda's going to be great, it needs to address the young people. It needs like, it needs young, youthful, new, fresh ideas to kind of engage, not just the rest of the world, but Rwanda as a very small country. And I contrast that with the Nigeria that I know where, no one has taken the right for a young person to try and run a political office, but try and run for political office in Nigeria without someone saying, do you know what, you can have that position. Do you know what? It does not happen. Now, I can only speak of Nigeria, and this is a Nigeria that I live in and I see every single day, especially in this political climate. But there is still that requirement for somebody, usually very high up in places like Nigeria, where they give you that position. Okay. It's not something you even remotely think that you can take. It's given to you.
Okay, let me go to Rwanda, which you've mentioned. An interesting debate that will take place, and I'm sure you've come across this debate having been to Rwanda several times. Some people ask, does Rwanda really qualify to be a democracy as we understand it, if you're going to use it as an example for a place where it's working?
So it has strong institutions. I would say somewhat independent from the government. It has security. Again, Rwanda is most definitely the most safest place I've ever been to in Africa. And more importantly, it has this long-term perspective to actually want to build the future.
So in your books, it ticks all the boxes, therefore qualifies as a democracy.
Yeah, so just one last thing, just to kind of put this into perspective. So when I decided to put my office in Kigali, a lot of people were surprised. I could have placed my office in Kampala. I could have placed it in Nairobi, which is typically people's first expectation. I could have easily placed it in Dar es Salaam. But to give you an understanding of the leadership and the long-term thinking is that there's no version of reality where the youth of Africa need to get smarter. So you need the tools, so good electricity. You need the internet. You need access to education beyond what the state can provide to really grow the populace. Rwanda recently have been the first African country to put fiber right across the entire sort of nation. So it's the first nation which has 4G right across the board. Now, in Nigeria, where we have humongous telcos and a huge amount of opportunity, there is no leadership at the top who's doing that. So if you think information technology and internet is going to be the future key of growth in Africa beyond our mineral resources,
right?
Where's the leadership elsewhere?
So as a businessman for whom economic growth is important, a curbing of freedoms to an extent is justifiable if the end is this blossoming of the economy. So is that sort of the reinvention of democracy you have in mind? Let's tweak it a bit. Let's turn down on the freedoms and the rights so that there's space for economic growth.
So I would never advocate any type of sort of control of democracy as is, but it needs to be set in the context of, great, everyone can vote in Nigeria, but you know what? Thousands of people dying. There's almost like a mini civil war going up in the northeast of the country. Again, for example, yesterday in Nigeria, in Lagos, there were political rallies where people were just running around smashing cars and stuff. So one of my employees, she's in hospital now because someone just decided to smash up her car in their youthful democratic vigor, if you will. So again, it's
But there has to be some type of common sort of balance between those two extremes.
So strong institutions.
People, a lot of Rwandese that I know abroad talk about the fact that the strong authoritarian regime of Kagame is a problem. So whether you have economic stability or economic growth or the growth of financial institutions, that's not sufficient enough. Because at the end of the day, people are dissatisfied. And the fact that they can't even express dissent is a problem.
Okay, very, very interesting. Now, people are even getting to their feet. At the back, yes. The gentleman with the microphone. I'll bring you in a minute. Let's just get our distinguished audience, our invited guests, to join the conversation. Sir.
My name is Kwame Nyama. originally from Ghana, living in the United Kingdom.
Okay.
My question goes to the word or the term democracy itself. Is democracy, as it's understood in the West and other countries, has the same meaning in Africa, where rule of law is not allowed to carry on?
Okay, did you want someone in particular to answer that?
Any of them.
Any one of the panelists? I have a feeling I know who you want to answer it. Rob, you take that. Okay, Rob, you take that.
You know, I feel like the term democracy is one that can be incredibly subjective. And even as someone who's sort of an academic and a researcher, I beg to differ when people say that democracy is something that's foreign to the continent of Africa. We had democratic institutions pre-colonial times. I have a Senegalese friend who's doing research on Senegalese democratic institutions amongst the Marabou, like long before the colonial moment. So I think it's important for us to talk about these issues as not a 21st century reality, but perhaps something that we can borrow from our traditional institutions that were just as democratic as what we talk about in quote-unquote, the West.
Okay, I'll take another question or comment from the back. Yes, the gentleman with his hand up, waving his newspaper frantically in the air.
Thank you, Alex. My name is Akintayo Adetokunbo. I'm a broadcaster and also an academic researcher. For the past 5 years, I've been looking at Africa's image problems and the Western media. Africans are very, very quick to jump in the bandwagon of people saying, yeah, the Western media is responsible for all the conflicts being reported in Africa. But I want to also talk about democracy. We've been talking about strong institutions in Africa. Is Africa really ripe for the Western style of democracy, just like the last speaker said? Because we have to look at Gaddafi in Libya. We look at somebody like Mugabe in Zimbabwe. What will happen if Mugabe should die today? Then ask ourselves, Obasanjo is still ruling Nigeria one way or the other. And we're talking about young people. Let me talk about, when you talk about young people, let's talk about
before you expand that, I just want to narrow you in on one particular question. You talked about the image of Africa, and you talked about how the blame has been put everywhere. Some would argue that this generation of Africans is probably the most image conscious. They are right on social media and are quite prolific in painting the image of the Africa that they want to be seen. So isn't it fair to say that actually social media has given the African population the media back, and now they can tell the story of Africa the way they want to?
I think it's beginning to happen, but we have to strike the balance, because you can't wish away what is happening in Central African Republic or whatever is happening in other parts of Africa, because it's always very easy to just try to like portray the good things. But actually, let me also talk about democracy quickly. Like you're talking about young people trying to get into politics.
No, we've done the young people bit. I'm quite interested on the image thing, and I'll tell you why, because a lot of people who are not African, when you talk about Africa, everyone has their image of it, and it's been largely informed by what they've read in newspapers or what they've seen on television. And the criticism has been that that image has been a misrepresentation of Africa. Isn't it the case now that social media has given people like you the tool now to tell the story of the Africa you want the world to see?
Yeah, I agree with you, but it's like we still have to strike the balance, because a lot of things are still happening around Africa. But it's like we can show the fashion shows in Africa, we can show all the tourist attractions in Africa, but we should not be blaming the Western media, even the BBC, for everything bad happening in Africa.
Let me hear some more thoughts on social media and its impact on democracy and the image of Africa, if those two are linked. Madam, at the front here.
My name is Gabriel.
No, madam, I'll come to you in a minute. Okay. Let me just take the lovely lady. Ladies first, yeah?
My name's Pedri Washin. I am first generation British. My parents are originally Nigerian. I wanted to direct this point at Jason because you've talked a lot about a disconnect, and we're talking about the youth. I come from a generation of young Nigerians that are very concerned about the diaspora and, in a sense, moving back to Nigeria. But what I want to sort of comment on or pose as a question is, how do the youth feel at ease to move back to their countries of origin when I know so many people that have tried, in a sense, to go back to Nigeria and start up businesses, but they're, in a sense, on the firing line because people feel like these people that have moved over to the UK are coming back and they're stealing our, I don't know, in a sense, entitlement or they're taking business away from us. How do we tackle that? And will it change in our lifetime?
Jason.
So, I think from my experience, again, I was born in London. I essentially lived in London until 2010, when I moved back to Nigeria. And I think I have been so surprised at the amount of young Nigerians who basically don't want to be in the West anymore. I spend a lot of time in the US and in the UK, and pretty much most young Nigerians that I meet, they don't want to be here anymore. They feel that in terms of the opportunities, the rapid amount of growth, almost the ability to kind of create their own reality is just more more able in Nigeria, for example. And I think myself as being like a peculiar example of that is, when I was in London, I was broke. Now I'm in Nigeria, I'm not broke. So I'm not going to come back to Nigeria. But again, it's like when someone from the West comes back to Nigeria, especially, like they are given almost like an elite status, irrespective of what school you went to or it's like you're literally given like the front of the queue type opportunities, especially at sort of like big, large kind of corporations. And
Why is it? Is it because you've got the accent, you're from London,
So the unfortunate thing, and I keep on talking about the weak institutions. The unfortunate thing is that I employ 200 people in Lagos. I'm increasingly finding it very difficult to actually find very well-educated, sort of talented young Nigerians within Nigeria, just because of the quality of the actual education system, which basically broke down like 20 or 30 years ago. So I'm actually having to find myself importing like young Nigerians from like the US, from the UK. Like, at the moment, I just hired some people from the Caribbean, people coming in from Rwanda, South Africa. So I'm pulling in talented people just to get a job done, where my hope and my hope will be that Nigeria will actually be able to kind of create those type of young, educated executives who can actually do the work which I need them to do.
Okay, and I'm going to bring this back. The reason I'm really pushing hard on the social media and the media platform, I'd imagine some of the headhunting you do, you'd go onto the social media platforms to make that work. Ayat, let me bring you in particularly on this point, because social media played a key role in bringing about the change that we saw in Libya. Do you think that could be probably one of the most powerful tools or weapons in the arsenal that young people have if they're going to reshape democracy in Africa?
Definitely, because, until now we are seeing that it's very difficult to silence that, and we hope that they don't try to continue to do that as they did in the 40 years under Gaddafi. There was kind of an outpour of Libyan young sentiments for the revolution in 2011 that couldn't be ignored, and we saw that in the NATO Security Council resolution that took place to allow for the operation to basically protect the civilians who were being bombarded by the regime at the time. So young people saw that their voices carried. They wish to see it take place today. Unfortunately, this past summer saw an aggressive assassination campaign against any voices that called for change in Libya. And that's kind of brought us to the situation today where we are seeing live combat and clashes between various militias.
So in order to avoid such dangerous scenarios and engagements on the ground, do young people find online a safer environment? Because no one quite knows who you are, but you can voice your...
I mean, definitely, but with so much accessibility on technology, your identity can be revealed, and we've seen cases like that take place in Libya. But it definitely kind of carries the message much faster than you would ever imagine before. It doesn't need as much infrastructure as you would need traditionally for media and for ideas to propagate and to spread. It helps people mobilize across the country that is geographically quite vast, and people aren't necessarily connected before social media.
Robtel, some would say that actually if there is any platform to show that Africa is reinventing democracy, the social media, the mobile platform would be it. Africa Spring, good example. Burkina Faso, another example where you begin the change, but you can't do it on the ground, pounding the streets. You go onto a digital platform and you try and garner support. The problem is, some people say, is you look at these sites and there's a lot of white noise. Yeah. These young people, they say, just talking about anything and everything but things that will actually impact democracy in Africa.
Well, I'm a bit of an imposter. I'm not on social media, so I don't know if I'm the best person to comment on this. But I think I think it's a platform that can be used for change, but I think it's also a platform that can cause a lot of discontent because you've got access to the information is there, but you can't do anything about it on the ground. And that creates so much angst. And I've seen that in my own country where people say, change is possible, but perhaps it might not be in our lifetime. And so I think social media, again, it's a great tool, it's a great platform, but until changes happen on the ground in terms of outside of the digital space, where people feel like they have a stake in the process of change, then I think it could create more harm than good in terms of that discontent.
What are your thoughts on social media? Some people might be thinking, well, this is a topic that maybe you might not be able to connect with. Are you going to prove them wrong?
Very easy to connect with because apart from everything else, it's doing something which I think is extremely positive. It's bringing into the political discourse lots of people who normally perhaps wouldn't have been part of that discourse. I think that is, to me, the most positive
How do you use it personally? I'm curious.
I have a Twitter, I have a Facebook account, quite a lot of people.
Do you run it yourself?
Yes, yes, I do indeed.
You run it yourself?
I run it myself, and I have quite a lot of followers, surprisingly. A lot of young people. But the point that I wanted to make, and it is in response to, I think, the young lady talking about coming back. I think there's one simple truth that all of us on the continent have to recognize. Nobody is going to build this African continent for us but ourselves. Europeans will not do it. When they involve themselves with Africa, they have their own goals, which they have been serving for centuries. The only people who are capable of building the Africa that we want of the future are ourselves. And we can do it, and we are best able to do it is if we are focusing on creating the institutions of governance in our countries that allow us to do so. Nobody is going to come out. Western media has its own goals when it is projecting Africa. That's fine.
I'm going to have to step in here because the clock tells me we're running out of time. But I can hear... Just feel free. I can hear you pushing big on institutions. I'm going to come for some closing remarks, and Rob, to hold that, keep that on ice for me. Let me just very quickly get a comment. Sir, I see you, but that gentleman has been very patient, waiting at the back. Make it brief. Okay, fire.
Well, my name is Gabriel from Aba Radio UK. First of all, I would just want to make comment on what my brother was saying about democracy and its understanding to the people of Africa.
Yeah, you're going to have to be quicker than that, my friend.
I'll do that. First, we have to understand that democracy is very expensive. And building up the institution that will make the democracy work very properly, I mean, one, there will be some sort of money involvement. And education play a very big role in democracy. We can see Africa.
So I'm going to stop you there and just tell you what I've heard.
Okay.
In your opinion, for democracy to work well, money and education.
Yeah, money and education.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to stop you there, but thank you for that comment. Yours, very briefly.
Yeah, thank you. I think the fact that we're here today, Michael Lanza, I'm chairman of MPP, New Patriotic Party in the UK. The fact that we're here today is itself significant. And what I would like to say is that we should be celebrating what Africa has gained in our democratic experiment, especially over the last 25 years.
And that is?
The 30 years, well, the fact that we're celebrating freedoms, we're celebrating freedom of association, freedom of expression, etc. So whether it's
in your opinion, there is a lot to celebrate.
Bellina, as demonstrated by Kennedy, it's important that today we're celebrating these things.
I've got to stop you there. A lot to celebrate. That's what you're saying. Am I right? Okay. Thank you very much. I'm afraid we've run out of time, and I did want to get some closing comments from everyone, but sorry, we ran out of time, but thank you very much for coming. Okay. Oh, okay. I've just been told we've got a few seconds. Can I take Rob Tell?
I just wanted to comment about the whole idea of going back.
Yeah?
Going back. I think one of the things that we have to do as those who come from the diaspora is to come back with a spirit of collaboration and not condescension. I think that's the first thing. Because when you come back with this notion that you know it all and you have all of the answers, people, of course, will resent you. So you have to be very careful.
Thank you. Collaboration, not condescension. Yours?
I think that the world watching Africa needs to kind of sit tight and watch that and know that this is a long process that's going to take its time, and we have a lot to see.
I got yours, didn't I? I did. Iroko, I did, as well as Nana. But thank you. Listen, thank you very much. A very big thank you to our panelists, Nana Akufo-Addo, and I'd also say thank you very much to Jason Njoku, who has joined us here online. Thank you very much to Ayat Neina, and I'd also like to say thank you very much to you, Robtel Pele. A very big thank you to our audience. You have been an amazing audience to have. Thank you very much. Clap for yourselves. And I'd love to save the special thank you to you who's watching online. Thank you very much for joining us. And remember, the conversation continues on BBC Democracy Day. That's the hashtag on Twitter. Thanks for joining us.